The recycling bins were lined up along the curb like soldiers, and sitting beside them, stacked neatly, almost politely, were 2 suitcases and a cardboard box sealed with masking tape. Maya O.C. recognized the blue handle of the rolling suitcase from 2 feet away. It was hers. She had bought it at a Winners in Mississauga 3 years ago, the week before their honeymoon to Portugal. She stood on the driveway of her own home in her pharmacy scrubs, the ones with the small coffee stain on the left sleeve she'd been meaning to get out, and tried to understand what she was looking at. The front door opened before she could figure it out. Her husband, James Whitmore, stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. He was wearing a shirt she didn't recognize. Behind him, barely visible in the warm light of the living room she had decorated herself, was a woman sitting on the couch. On their couch. She was young, maybe 24, maybe less. She had her feet tucked under her like she owned the place. James. Maya's voice came out quieter than she intended. What is this? I think you know what it is. I don't. I really don't. She climbed the 2 front steps. He didn't move back to let her in. Whose car is that in the driveway? That's not something you need to worry about anymore. She looked at the suitcases again. The recycling bins. The masking tape. You packed my things? I had help. He said it like it was nothing. Like he was telling her he'd had help assembling furniture. The woman on the couch turned her head. She had the kind of stillness that comes from knowing you've already won. James, who is she? Her name's Kelsey. She's been staying here for a few days. He said it without blinking. I was going to do this differently, but you're home early. Maya climbed the last step and tried to move past him into her own house. He put his hand on the door frame. Don't make this ugly. Don't make this ugly. She heard her voice break on the word ugly and hated herself for it. You've packed my things in boxes and put them next to the recycling bins, James. On a Tuesday. You're going to want to keep your voice down. Why? So the neighbors don't hear. She gestured to the street. Mrs. Hartman next door was watering her front garden at a pace that had slowed considerably since Maya pulled up. Across the street, a man she didn't know had stopped walking his dog. The dog had sat down, apparently also interested. It's a little late for that. James stepped down to the driveway, lowering his voice. I'm not happy, Maya. I haven't been for a long time. I need you to take your things and go. I'll have the lawyer reach out this week. You already called a lawyer. I've been planning this for a while. That was the part that cut deepest. Not the girl on the couch, not the suitcases, the while. She thought about the past few months. The Christmas dinner he'd barely spoken at. The way he'd started putting his phone face down whenever she walked into a room. The night she reached for him in bed and he said he was tired. She had believed him every time. She had told herself she was overthinking it. How long is a while? That's not productive to get into right now. James. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. How long? He looked away. About 8 months. 8 months. She had been working double shifts at the pharmacy for 8 months so they could save for a down payment on a bigger house. 8 months of coming home exhausted, still making dinner, still asking about his day, still trying. You told me you loved me last week, she said. I was being kind. Something broke open inside her chest. Not loudly, there was nothing dramatic about it. It was the quiet collapse of something she'd been holding up without knowing how much effort it was taking. Her phone was in her hand. She didn't remember reaching for it. She pressed her sister's name and held it to her ear and turned away from James's face. The call didn't connect. A car slowed at the curb. Not her sister. A silver sedan she recognized as belonging to Dr. Renwick, Oliver Renwick, the physician who ran the family practice 3 doors down from the pharmacy where Maya worked. He was her professional contact more than anything else. The kind of man she called when a prescription needed clarification. Who called her when he couldn't reach a patient. She'd had maybe 4 real conversations with him in 2 years. He pulled to the curb and lowered his window. Maya? Is everything all right? She almost said yes. The word was right there, automatic, the kind of reflex that takes over when you're too tired to explain. No, she said instead. Not really. He got out of the car. He took in the suitcases. The recycling bins. Maya standing in her pharmacy scrubs, holding her phone, her eyes dry in a way that suggested they might not stay that way. He looked at James, then back at her. Do you need somewhere to go? Oliver, this is a private matter, James said. I'm not speaking to you. Oliver said it calmly without heat and looked at Maya. I have a spare room. My house is 10 minutes from here. If you need somewhere to stay while you sort this out, the offer is there. You barely know her, James said. I know her well enough to know she shouldn't be standing on a driveway next to a recycling bin with her suitcase while a stranger sits in her living room. He picked up the blue rolling suitcase by the handle. I'll put these in my car. You can tell me what you want to do once you've had a minute. James stepped forward. You need to stay out of this. Oliver turned. He was not a large man, but he had the particular stillness of someone who has dealt with emergencies long enough to stop being rattled by people who raise their voices. I'm going to suggest you think carefully about what you do next. This street is watching. Your wife has rights, including the right to accept help from someone who offers it. He put the first suitcase in his trunk. Maya picked up the cardboard box herself. It was lighter than she expected. She thought about what was in it. Her pharmacy textbooks probably, the ones from the shelf in the second bedroom they used as a home office. Maybe the framed photo of her mother she kept on the desk. She walked to Oliver's car without looking at James. Behind her she heard Kelsey say something from the doorway. James said something back, quieter. Then the front door closed. The blue door she had repainted last spring because James said the old color was dated. Oliver drove without pressing her for details. He put the radio on low and left it there. She appreciated that more than she could say. By the time they pulled into the driveway of a modest brick house on a quiet street in Burlington, she had stopped pretending she wasn't crying. "Sorry," she said, reaching for the sleeve of her scrubs. "Don't apologize." He handed her a packet of tissues from the glove compartment, which she found oddly touching. "The spare room is at the top of the stairs. Clean sheets. I'll make tea." She sat in his kitchen while the kettle boiled and tried to do arithmetic in her head. Her bank account had maybe $900 in it. Their joint account, the one she had been depositing into faithfully, the one where the house savings lived. She pulled up the app with shaking fingers. The balance was $243. She looked at the number for a long time. "The joint account," she said when Oliver set the mug in front of her. "Yes, it's nearly empty. We had over $30,000 in it." He sat down across from her. He didn't say anything immediately, which was the right thing to do. "I've been working doubles for 8 months to save that money." She heard herself say it and it still didn't feel real. "For a house, do you have your own account? Separate from the joint one?" "Yes, but I haven't been putting much in it. We were supposed to be saving together." She set her phone on the table. "He said he's had a lawyer for a while. He said he'd been planning this." Oliver wrapped both hands around his mug. "Then you need a lawyer too. Tonight if possible. I know someone, Helen Achterberg, she's a family lawyer in Hamilton. She's very good. I can call her in the morning. I can't afford. Let me worry about that part. She and I have known each other a long time. She owes me a favor." He said it without making it feel like charity, which took skill. "Tonight, just drink your tea. We'll make a plan tomorrow." Maya drank her tea. She sat in a stranger's kitchen, a near stranger's kitchen, in her work scrubs, and outside the October wind was doing something to the maple in the backyard, and she thought about James saying I was being kind. She had believed he loved her. She had built a whole life on that belief. She put her mug in the sink and went upstairs. The spare room had a blue duvet and a lamp that cast warm light, and a window that looked out over a garden that had gone to seed for the season. She sat on the edge of the bed and stayed there for a while. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Just so you know, he told me about you. He said you two have been basically roommates for years. Don't be dramatic about this." Maya read it twice, blocked the number. Then she opened her contacts and found the name of her closest friend Aliyah, who lived in Guelph and worked nights at a hospital, and answered on the second ring despite it being nearly 11 o'clock. "I need to tell you something," Maya said. She talked for 40 minutes. Aliyah listened and swore at the appropriate moments, which helped considerably. By the end of the call, Maya had been given 3 pieces of advice. Document everything, touch nothing in the joint account, and call her in the morning. She lay down in the blue duvet and stared at the ceiling. She thought about the $30,000. She thought about James on their wedding day, the way he'd reached for her hand during the vows. She had believed him then too. She got up at 2 a.m. and opened her laptop. She spent 4 hours researching marital property law in Ontario, financial disclosure requirements during separation, what constituted dissipation of marital assets. She found the Ontario Family Law Act and read the relevant sections. She found forums full of women who had been through exactly this and took notes on what they wished they'd known. She wrote everything down in a Word document she saved to a USB drive she found in the bottom of her makeup bag. By 6 in the morning, she had 3 pages of questions for Helen Achterberg, and a timeline of every major financial decision she and James had made over 5 years of marriage, including the dates of every deposit she'd made into the joint account. She had the bank notifications on her phone going back 14 months. She had documentation. When Oliver came downstairs to start coffee, she was still at the kitchen table. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I slept a little." She turned her laptop so he could see. "I found something. He's been making transfers out of the joint account for 6 months. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. All to an account I don't recognize. I have the notification history." Oliver looked at the screen. His expression was careful and controlled in a way that told her he was making an effort to keep it that way. "Bring all of this to Helen." "I will." She paused. "Oliver, why did you stop?" He poured his coffee and was quiet for a moment. "I used to drive that street to avoid traffic. I saw your car and then I saw you standing there with your suitcase next to the bins. He looked at her. I have a younger sister. She went through something similar about 5 years ago and I was out of the country. By the time I knew what was happening, she'd already made a lot of decisions she couldn't undo because she didn't have anyone to slow her down and help her think. He picked up his mug. I guess I stopped because I know what it looks like when someone needs 10 minutes to breathe before the whole world crashes in on them. Maya thought about that. Thank you, she said. I mean it. Thank me after you've talked to Helen. Helen Achterberg's office was in a Victorian on James Street in Hamilton, the kind of building that had been a house before it became a workplace and never entirely forgot it. Helen herself was 62, wore reading glasses on a beaded chain, and had the direct manner of someone who has spent decades watching people underestimate women. She read Maya's documentation. She read it carefully and asked specific questions. He's been moving money for 6 months, Helen said. That's not impulsive, that's planned. She made a note. The account he's been transferring to, do you have any idea whose name it's in? No, but I have the transaction reference numbers. Helen looked up. Do you have access to the shared email account? Yes, go through it. Maya had not thought of that. She pulled out her phone at the kitchen table of Helen's office while Helen's assistant brought in coffee, and logged into the email address she and James had set up for house admin, utilities, insurance, anything they'd needed to deal with together. James had been the one to suggest it 4 years ago. He had probably forgotten she still knew the password. She found the first email from a woman named Kelsey Ford within 3 minutes. It was dated 9 months ago. It said, "Can't wait for this to be over so we can just be normal." Maya's hands were very steady as she forwarded it to herself. There were 46 more. She forwarded everything. She found correspondence with a financial planner she'd never heard of about moving assets into a holding structure ahead of a separation. She found an email chain with a lawyer, not James's current lawyer, a different one, from 7 months ago that discussed in clinical detail how to minimize the matrimonial home payout to a spouse who worked in a lower income profession. She thought about the word profession. She had a pharmacy degree and 12 years of experience. She had been the reason they had savings at all. She found a draft email James had written but never sent, to Kelsey, about the house they planned to buy together once the settlement was done. It named a neighborhood in Oakville. It named a budget. The budget matched almost exactly the $30,000 that had been sitting in their joint account. Maya saved everything to her USB drive and handed it to Helen without saying anything. Helen looked through it, and her expression did something specific and controlled. "This is financial misconduct," she said. "It demonstrates a deliberate effort to deplete joint assets in advance of separation. In Ontario, this is treated very seriously by the courts." She set down the drive. "I'm going to file for divorce on your behalf today. I'm also going to apply for an order freezing all remaining joint assets and compelling full financial disclosure. And I want to flag something else." She pulled up one of the emails. "This correspondence with the financial planner, depending on the structure he used, this may constitute fraud. Just against you. Potentially against the tax authority." Maya sat with that for a moment. "What does that mean for me?" "It means your case is considerably stronger than you might think. You have evidence of deliberate asset concealment, a documented affair, and possible fraud. The court takes a dim view of all of these." Helen leaned back. "What you're going to get out of this depends on how well we present the evidence. But I'll tell you right now, Maya, you should not be walking away from this marriage with nothing, not based on what I'm looking at." She filed that afternoon. On the way back to Oliver's house, Maya sat in his car and watched the lake go by on the Queen Elizabeth Way and thought about James saying the word kind. Her phone rang. James. She declined it. It rang again. She turned the phone over on her knee. "You don't have to answer that," Oliver said. "I know." She watched a transport truck pass. "He transferred our house savings to a holding account so he and Kelsey could buy a house in Oakville." A beat of silence. "I see. We were supposed to be saving for our future. That's what he told me every time I deposited money. He said we were building something together." She looked out the window. "He was building something, just not with me." Oliver didn't say anything for a while. Then, "Helen will take care of it. I know she will." Maya turned her phone back over and blocked James's number. "I'm angry," she said, a little surprised. "I thought I'd be sad, but I'm mostly just angry. That seems about right." He was served the next morning. James called the pharmacy before lunch. Her supervisor, a kind and competent woman named Barb, came to find Maya in the dispensary and told her there was a man on the line saying it was a family emergency. "It's not an emergency," Maya said. "It's my husband. We're separating. I'm sorry he called here." Barb looked at her. "He was fairly aggressive about it. I'm sorry, don't apologize. Hospital policy covers staff contact information." Barb put a hand briefly on her arm. "If you need time, it's there. We'll cover your shifts. I'd rather work." She worked the rest of the afternoon on autopilot, counting pills, counseling a man about his blood pressure medication, answering questions about flu shots. At 4 p.m. Helen called. He called my office 7 times, Helen said. I've documented each one. He also contacted the bank to dispute the freeze order, which failed, and I've received a letter from his lawyer, a Gareth Sloan, not particularly reputable but cheap, offering a settlement. He wants to keep the investment accounts and split the remaining joint assets 50-50. After he took $30,000 out of the joint account. Correct, it's insulting. Helen's voice was dry. I've responded accordingly. There's one more thing. Gareth Sloan called me directly to suggest that any assets your husband moved to the holding account were done so in advance of your separation, and therefore could be considered pre-separation planning rather than dissipation. Is that a real argument? It's an argument people make. It won't hold up against the email correspondence you provided, which shows the planning began while the marriage was ongoing and both parties considered it intact. The financial planner correspondence in particular is very damaging to his position. A pause. He's going to try to claim you're having an affair with Oliver Renwick. Maya went very still. What? His lawyer floated it. They're going to suggest your willingness to move into Oliver's home so quickly indicates a prior relationship. Helen's voice was matter of fact. It won't change the outcome. Ontario is a no-fault divorce jurisdiction. Even if it were true, it wouldn't affect asset division. But I want you to be aware, there's nothing between Oliver and me. I know, and will say so. Don't worry about it. She told Oliver over dinner that evening. He received the information with the same controlled calm he seemed to bring to everything. James is grasping, he said. He has no evidence because there's nothing to find. Let him try. He's going to make things difficult for you. He can try that too. Oliver set down his fork. Maya, I stopped on that street because it was the right thing to do. If people want to make something of that, I can't stop them. What I can do is tell the truth, which is that I offered you a spare room and a contact name for a lawyer. That's the whole story. You've done more than that. Not really. He picked up his fork again. You did the research. You found the emails. You built the case. I just opened a door. She thought about that for the rest of the evening. At 10 o'clock she was sitting at the kitchen table going over the financial disclosure documents Helen had compelled James to produce when her phone buzzed. An unknown number. She opened the message. A photo. James and Kelsey in what looked like a restaurant booth, her leaning into him, both of them smiling. The caption. Thought you should see what happiness looks like. Move on, sweetie. Maya stared at the photo for a long moment, then she screenshotted it, forwarded it to Helen with the subject line harassment evidence, and blocked the number. She went back to her financial documents. The hearing was scheduled for a Thursday in December. Maya wore her good charcoal coat and the pearl earrings her mother had given her. Helen had advised her to look like herself, professional, composed, not performative. She arrived early and sat with Helen in a side room reviewing the evidence summary one more time. James arrived with Gareth Sloan. He looked like he hadn't been sleeping. His suit was fine but his face was drawn and he kept checking his phone. Kelsey was not with him. Maya noticed that and filed it away without letting herself read too much into it. The judge was a man named Morrison, the Honorable Kenneth Morrison, who had the kind of face that had forgotten how to be surprised. He read through the filings with the thoroughness of someone who genuinely intended to understand what he was looking at. He understood what he was looking at. Gareth Sloan made his opening remarks. He described James as a man who had made some poor decisions under significant emotional strain, who had attempted to plan for a separation he believed was inevitable, and who was now being unfairly characterized as a financial abuser, when in reality he was simply someone whose marriage had broken down. Judge Morrison said, "You're referring to the $32,000 transferred to a holding account over a 6-month period?" Gareth Sloan said, "In part, Your Honor. And the correspondence with a financial planner dated to a period during which your client was still cohabiting with his wife and, by his own admission, had not disclosed his intention to separate." A pause. "Yes, Your Honor." See, he moved on. Helen was methodical and unhurried. She walked through the emails, the bank transfers, the financial planner correspondence, the draft email about the Oakville house. She called Maya to the stand and Maya answered every question without embellishment. She described coming home from work on a Tuesday evening to find her belongings beside the recycling bins. She described the joint account. She described what she had found in the shared email. Gareth Sloan cross-examined her. He suggested she had been cold and inattentive as a wife. He suggested her long work hours had contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. He suggested her relationship with Oliver Renwick was not entirely professional. Maya answered each question. No, certainly not. He had nothing else. James took the stand. Helen was gentle with him in the way that a skilled lawyer is gentle when they want someone to feel comfortable enough to keep talking. Mr. Whitmore, when did you first consult a lawyer about separation? I'd say around 8 months before we separated. And at that point, were you and your wife still living together? Yes. Still sharing a joint account? And during those 8 months, you made 32 transfers out of that joint account totaling approximately $32,000? James looked at his lawyer. I was protecting my share of the assets. From your wife? From a difficult situation. Helen nodded slowly. A difficult situation that your wife was unaware of. Yes. So you made 32 transfers, consulted a lawyer, engaged a financial planner, and planned an alternative purchase of a property with another woman. All while your wife continued making deposits into the same joint account under the assumption that you were both saving for your shared future. The silence in the courtroom had a specific quality. I didn't say it was perfect, James said finally. No, Helen agreed, you certainly didn't. Judge Morrison's ruling took 40 minutes to deliver. He granted the divorce and found in Maya's favor on every contested point. She was awarded her equitable share of the matrimonial home, repayment of the $32,000 within 60 days, spousal support for 2 years and legal costs. He described James's behavior as a deliberate effort to disadvantage his spouse through coordinated financial manipulation during the marriage, and said, without particular emotion, that the courts of Ontario had no patience for it. James sat very still when the ruling was read. He didn't look at Maya. Outside on the steps of the courthouse, Aaliyah was waiting. She had driven up from Guelph that morning and not told Maya because she didn't want to add pressure. She took one look at Maya's face and said, "You won." "I won." Aaliyah hugged her so hard Maya's good charcoal coat wrinkled. Oliver had offered to drive but she'd told him not to come. She texted him now, "Done, we won everything," he texted back. "Of course you did, you built the whole case yourself." "Dinner to celebrate?" She texted. "Yes, but I'm buying." The matrimonial house sold quickly in the spring. The equity, after the mortgage and settlement costs, gave Maya enough to put a down payment on a small semi-detached in Hamilton, near the lake, near the pharmacy, near Helen's office on James Street. She closed on it in April, the last week of April, the week the cherry trees along her new street were doing something extraordinary. She stood in her empty living room with a coffee from Tim Hortons and looked out the front window and thought, "This is mine. Not ours, mine." Her job at the pharmacy had changed too. Barb had put her name forward for a senior pharmacist position that opened up in February, and Maya had applied without really expecting anything to come of it, and then she'd gotten it. The pay increase was enough that she stopped doing the late-night mental arithmetic about whether she could cover the hydro bill. She started going to a support group. Her therapist had suggested it and she'd resisted for a while, and then she'd gone once and found 9 other women sitting in a church basement in Dundas, all of them at various stages of the same kind of unwinding. They talked about money and lawyers and the strange exhaustion of rebuilding. They brought snacks. Maya started bringing butter tarts because there was a good bakery near the pharmacy, and it seemed like the kind of thing that helped. At her 4th meeting, a woman named Patience, quiet, 38, a nurse who had left her husband of 10 years with almost nothing, sat beside her and asked how she had found the courage to document everything so quickly. Maya thought about it. "I was angry," she said. "Anger is clarifying." Patience laughed. Not happily but recognizably. They stayed after the meeting to talk. Patience had a situation that was complicated by the fact that she'd co-signed a small business loan for her husband 2 years ago and wasn't sure what that meant for the separation. Maya didn't know the answer but she knew someone who did. She texted Helen that evening and had a response back before 10. She brought the response to Patience at the next meeting, and the one after that, she brought a list of free and sliding scale legal resources she'd put together one afternoon at work. Because the legal aid situation in Ontario was genuinely dire, and the women in the group kept running into the same wall. She printed 20 copies and put them in a folder. By summer the folder had become a binder. By fall, the binder had become a shared Google Drive that she and Patience and 3 other women from the group maintained together. They listed lawyers, financial counselors, housing support lines, employment services. They added a section on what to document and when to document it and how to organize bank records in a way a lawyer could actually use. They added a section on what questions to ask. Oliver saw the Google Drive when she showed it to him over lunch one afternoon. They had lunch sometimes, the way people do when they've been through something together and come out the other side as friends. He looked through it carefully. "This is good," he said. "This is actually really good. It's just a document. It's a document that someone going through the worst week of their life could open on their phone at midnight and actually use." He scrolled a bit further. "Have you ever thought about making it into something more formal? A proper resource? A website maybe? I'm a pharmacist. You're also someone who built a separation case from scratch in 12 hours and won everything. He set her phone down. I know a woman at the Hamilton Community Foundation. They fund exactly this kind of project. Would you be willing to talk to her? She was. The meeting at the Hamilton Community Foundation was in November, in a glass-walled boardroom overlooking Gore Park. The program officer's name was Claudette, and she had read Maya's resource binder in advance, and had questions that were specific and serious, and treated Maya like someone whose time was valuable. Maya answered every question clearly and directly and did not apologize once, which felt like progress. The grant came through in January. Not enormous, $18,000, but enough to build a real website, print materials and partner with 3 legal clinics in the region. Maya called it groundwork. She designed the logo herself, a small plant coming up through concrete, because it was the first image that came to mind and it turned out to be right. She still worked at the pharmacy. She still went to the support group on Tuesday evenings in the church basement in Dundas. But now she went as a co-facilitator, alongside a woman named Ruth who had been running the group for 4 years and welcomed the help. The women who came through the group started finding the groundwork website, and women outside the group started finding it too. Someone in Kingston, someone in Sudbury, a woman in a small town near Thunder Bay who sent a message saying that she'd been up at 3 a.m. unable to sleep, and she'd found the resource list and she'd written down 4 phone numbers and she felt for the first time like she might be able to do this. Maya saved that message. She put it in a folder called Reasons on her desktop. She thought about Jim sometimes. Not often, and not with pain. More the way you think about a place you used to live, a little detached, a little curious about how it looked from the outside. She knew, through Aaliyah who knew someone, that Kelsey and James had moved into the Oakville house they'd been planning. She knew the criminal referral around the financial planner arrangement was still being reviewed by the CRA. She knew that knowing these things was not her business, and that she only needed to keep moving forward. She was good at moving forward. She was getting better at it all the time. In March, she was invited to speak at a legal aid fundraiser in Toronto. A 20-minute presentation about why accessible legal information matters, with particular attention to financial abuse and separation. She wrote it on a Saturday morning at her kitchen table with coffee and her cat. She had gotten a cat, an orange tabby named Biscuit who had strong opinions about sitting on paperwork, and she practiced it twice in the hallway and then decided she was ready. She stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom, and looked at 200 people and said, "The night my husband put my suitcase next to the recycling bins and told me to leave, I had $900 in my personal account, and a $32,000 joint account that had already been emptied. I stood on that driveway and I did not know one single thing about my legal rights. I did not know what I was entitled to. I did not know what questions to ask." She paused. 18 months later, I own a house. I run a resource organization that's helped over 100 women in Ontario navigate separation, and I wrote the sentence financial manipulation during marriage in a grant application and got funded. She looked out at the room. What changed wasn't my circumstances. It was information, access, someone stopping on the right street at the right time and offering a door. The applause was substantial. After the presentation, a woman waited until everyone else had moved toward the drinks table before approaching Maya. She was maybe 30, wearing a blazer that was slightly too big, the kind you wear because you don't yet feel entitled to the space the right size would give you. "I'm going through something," the woman said. "I found out 2 weeks ago that my husband has been withdrawing from our joint account for almost a year. I don't know where to start." Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a groundwork card. "Start here," she said. "And if you want to talk, my email is on the back. You can write to me anytime, I'll write back." The woman looked at the card for a moment. Then she looked up. Did it get better? Maya thought about her house near the lake, the cherry trees in April, Biscuit the cat and his opinions about paperwork, the Tuesday evenings in the church basement in Dundas, the Google Drive that had become a website that had become something real. "Yes," she said simply, "it gets better. And then it gets more than better. It gets yours."